You're looking for a room?
Yeah, just got to town.
Looking for a place to stay for a while.
I think you'll like Bob. He's such a sweet man.
Hi.
I'm Bob.
Joyce talks a lot about you.
She does?
We are talking about the suspense thriller movie Room for Rent. Now this one is directed by Tommy Stovall and stars Lin Shaye. Now Lin Shaye has become a bit of a screen queen in her later years, starring in films like the Insidious franchise, and has become the face of that particular kind of franchise. She's been in a bunch of other kind of horror films as well. So here she is taking centre stage once again in this kind of almost like a Fatal Attraction style thriller. So what's the story? So we have Lin Shaye, who plays this character called Joyce, and she is this lonely widow who is in some little bit of a financial trouble after her husband passes away. So she's kind of to try and earn some money, she decides she's going to almost do like a kind of Airbnb type thing. Now she's a little bit of a technophobe. She's kind of a little bit old school in her methods. And initially she kind of, opens it up to a kind of a few people. First of all, we have this couple with this kind of young woman who she becomes kind of friends with, and her somewhat kind of a nasty piece of work boyfriend. But the main kind of story takes place when we have this kind of this kind of drifter who she happens to kind of like cross paths with, who's looking for a room to rent, and she ultimately kind of talks him into kind of renting a room from her, but starts to take a bit of an unhealthy obsession with him. Now Joyce's character is kind of obsessed with these kind of like these romance novels, and she starts to kind of like fantasize about this guy and almost kind of try to have these kind of delusions about what's kind of going on with him, and she's kind of starts to be a little bit sort of creepy towards him, but in a kind of a almost like a sexual predator type way. And then matters are kind of muddled further when this kind of friend that she made at the beginning of the movie sort of comes back to visit, and then these three characters have a bit of a kind of a power dynamic between the three of them, shall we say. So let's start talking about Room for Rent, what works in this movie. Well, first of all, I've got to say Lin Shaye gives an absolute powerhouse performance in this film. It's really interesting because the plot is not particularly kind of surprising. You can kind of guess where it's going, but nonetheless, I think Lin Shaye's character Joyce is both, you feel both empathy for her, but also you kind of appreciate that she's a manipulator, and she has a very dark side, but you can't help but still somewhat root for her, at least initially. So that's down to kind of Lin Shaye's very vulnerable performance, and obviously the way this kind of this movie presents her being, quite a frail, timid lady in some scenes, where she's kind of harassed by the kind of the local kind of like skate kids and all of that. So you feel empathy for her. Now it's interesting as the movie progresses, the film is kind of, it gives you lots of versions of events. As she's talking to different characters, you'll learn some things, and it's about think like the Joker from The Dark Knight. You never really know what version of her story is true because she tells so many of them, and the movie actually doesn't kind of spoon feed you and kind of really confirm what's happened. So a lot of it is kind of down to your interpretation. Now, at the beginning of the movie, we kind of ultimately see the aftermath of the death of her husband, and it's never really outwardly said, but you can kind of maybe kind of think, was this really an accident? It's never kind of said one way or the other, but obviously as the movie progresses and Joyce's character does show some murderous intent, you can't help but think, was this really an accident? Right, then this kind of like this thing goes right through the movie. So it'll sound weird, but Lin Shaye's character did so much remind me of Heath Ledger from The Dark Knight here. This is the way she kind of has these alternate histories, and how well, she's not perfect at manipulating, but she ultimately is trying to manipulate everyone around her. So I thought she did a great job here, and she's obviously the central character. But I also liked the male lead here, played by Oliver Rayon, who is this guy who's 40 years her junior, looking at their real birth dates, the actors. And he's kind of like a bit of a, and again, he has, you see with kind of like, he might have a bit of a checkered past, but it's never kind of, it's never, the movie never kind of gives you all the information. So it hints to things, but never really kind of spells it out for you ultimately. So this movie, although the plot is very simple, it kind of has these kind of peripheral world building that it doesn't kind of, it lets you kind of fill in the blanks, but it's not it's not blanks that will confuse you necessarily, but it's just kind of like lead you to believe and make judgments about people, which I thought was quite a fun way the movie progresses. And obviously as the film progresses, your opinions will start to kind of maybe differ on certain people. So let's talk about what maybe doesn't work quite so well. Like I said, I think the main problem here, but this is in no means a bad movie in any way, but the movie is very predictable. I mean, when you've watched this, you can pretty much guess what's going to happen. I mean, the cast is relatively small. There's 3 main cast members. You have a couple of other small characters that will pop up, but for the most part, it's these 3 characters, and you can guess what's going to happen in regards to the dynamic between the 3 of them. So I don't think it really kind of breaks any kind of new ground about what's kind of happening there. So maybe it was somewhat predictable. Now I like the acting from Lin Shaye and Oliver Rayon. The other woman, not a bad actor, but I felt the way she was written, she just seemed to jump to conclusions a little quickly, and she's a little bit. She kind of does things that I felt didn't come at a natural speed without kind of giving away spoilers. So she makes certain decisions within the film to investigate and kind of question certain people and kind of and certain character choices. And I didn't feel that they were necessarily earned at that point. It didn't seem like the story had naturally progressed to the point where she would do that. So to me, that didn't ring quite true. But I've got to say, that's really the only kind of the main kind of nitpicks I would say about this film. I actually thought this was a very well made film. Now, it's not a gory film. It's not an action-packed film. This is really a drama, a suspense thriller. Like I said, it's not a fast-paced film. But if you like a well-acted, somewhat pedestrian plot, but it's nonetheless an intriguing one, then this is definitely one I can recommend. On a technical side of things, I thought the movie was very proficiently made. I think it was well shot. There's some kind of quite good use of camera angles and kind of perspective and things like that. I thought that was all good. Obviously, the sound design was good. The soundtrack was, it's just in the background. It wasn't kind of obtrusive in any way, although it wasn't particularly memorable, admittedly. But this was a perfectly acceptable thriller that I think any person that likes stuff like Fatal Attraction, Single White Female, that kind of genre of films would enjoy this. But what really sells it for me was kind of Lin Shaye's performance of making her both a threat, but also a character that you do have empathy for. So it was a real dichotomy in performance, and I thought that was excellent. So generally speaking, I would actually recommend this film. It doesn't sound like it will be a film that everyone's going to enjoy, it being, not a kind of explosions or zombies or anything like that, but it is a solidly made film with an excellent performance by Lin Shaye here, who's really kind of invested in this character. I saw her in another movie, Final Wish, I think it was, and that was, that wasn't as good, to be honest with you. But this one, I really feel like she's fully invested and really makes a kind of a nice, well-rounded, three-dimensional character here, and does a good job of both being frail and also threatening. So for me, it's a 7 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.